What is up, Planeswalkers? Theurx6 back with some more Magic the Gathering. Kind of arena, not exactly really, I assume. Because of the music in the image here, you probably know what's going down. But before that, you should totally head over to flipsidegaming.com and use promo code 6 for 10% off on orders over $10. It's a good deal. It helps support the channel. And if you enter between now and May 20th, you'll be when you use my promo code, you'll be entered into a drawing for one of these 3 really sweet Richard Kane Ferguson playmats. All you have to do in order to enter is use my promo code when buying from Flipside Gaming. They have a lot of cool stuff. You should totally check them out. Get that cool things. Now, what are we doing today? Today, I'm doing a little bit of a set review. I'm not doing a full set review unless I have enough time. If you want me to do a real full set review, let me know, and I can try and squeeze that into my schedule. But I figured, since I wasn't able to talk about all the spoilers, because I had to be gone for a bit, that I would give you all a little bit of my thoughts on some of the more important cards. The cards I think are going to be either fantastic in Standard and Arena, or cards that I'm just really excited for in various formats and strategies. And then I'm going to do something that I've seen, I think it was Channel Fireball. I think it was Channel Fireball in the past. They did something called Hit or Myth, and I just haven't seen it recently. I did look for it like several sets ago, and they didn't seem to be doing that anymore, so I assume they're still not. But what I'm going to be doing essentially is looking at all of the mythics and saying whether or not I think they're awesome or I think they're mistakes. And when I say mistakes, I mean, does it feel mythic? Is this card maybe overpowered? Is it super underpowered? And the way I'm going to judge if it feels mythic is via like the flavor of the card, the interestingness of the mechanics and things like that. So that's what I'm going to do. But first, I'm going to go through some of the cards that I picked out from each rarity that I think are going to be very interesting. So Kai's Ghost Form is the first one I have here. And I think that this is probably one of the coolest cards that has been... Excuse me. One of the coolest cards that has been added, specifically because of Muldrotha. And you all know that I love Muldrotha. And this just allows you to do really stupid things with Muldrotha, because not only does it allow you on exile to get Muldrotha back, which is one of the biggest problems, but also it just means that whenever she dies, she's back, and you just pay 1 black, put this back on her. It's fantastic. This is also decent with the Planeswalker combo decks that I'm looking forward to making. You know, the Jace Self-Mill and the Turbo Bolas deck that uses the Clone Jace, the Sexy Jace. So I'm really interested in seeing where this goes. I don't think, for what it's worth, I don't think it's actually like insane or anything. It's not going to break open Standard, but it's going to be fun. It's going to lead to a lot of interesting decks. Obnix's Cruelty, I think, is actually a really strong card. We've seen how good Lava Coil is, as well as Cryo the Carnarium, and both of those cards, one of the big reasons that they're so good is because of the fact that they exile things. And Obnix's Cruelty being a nice instant, it's a decent cost for what you're getting, to be honest. But the fact that it is a 3-cost instant that is a -5/-5 is very large. It's very good. That's a really decent rate for Standard, at least. And I think that this is probably going to be a pretty decent card in any black control deck. Possibly ones that aren't using red, but for the most part, I think this is just a very strong, helpful card. Now, I should note, it's not as good because the gods, when they're exiled, they still get put back. But for what it's worth, you know, you're still putting them back. Pauline Bright Druid. This is not something that I really considered until I played in the sponsored streamer event. A lot of people seem to be running Pauline Bright Druid, and I think the reason for that is these like kind of greedy proliferate decks need something in the early game that allows them to just have a board against those aggressive decks that are going to come eventually. So I think them using Pauline Bright Druid is kind of a concede to that, in which you're going to be able to have this as just a Grizzly Bear. It's not good, but you are playing a proliferate deck. It's possible to make this card a little bit stronger. But you're playing a Grizzly Bear just so that you can stabilize until you get to your really good value. And if you top deck in the late game, hopefully you have at least one thing that you do want to proliferate, and this is a card that I think is going to be integral in those decks. I'm not a deck builder though, so I'm not entirely sure. Sorin's Thirst, I've not heard like anyone mention this, but I think this is an incredibly strong card. This is a reprint. We've seen this in the past, as you can see over here. And if I recall correctly, this is a decent card in both limited and as well as constructed, depending, of course, on what the meta looks like. But I think this is a very strong card for those those Orzhov life gain decks, the ones with Ajani's Pride Band stuff, where you can just kind of get rid of an annoying creature that you can't really go through, something like an Adonto Vanguard or something like that. Why did I say Adonto Vanguard? I don't know. But it's just a nice way to deal with those aggressive starts in a deck that is able to play black, and a deck that would like to gain some life. Notably, this is a potential card for the Bolas Citadel deck, because it gains you the life back that you would have already lost, so it's a functionally free card. Spark Harvest. If Aristocrats is a deck, and there are a large number of Planeswalkers running around, I can see Spark Harvest being an integral part of the Aristocrats deck's removal. Now, I'm not entirely sure that that's the case, because of the fact that you still do, like, it's a sorcery, so you still need to just do it on your turn, which is just not as good as it otherwise would be as an instant. But what's nice is that you can just pay 4 mana if you have to. Regardless, either way, I think this is a fantastic pickup in Limited. If you're able to, this is just like unconditional removal. And 4 mana black removal at sorcery speed is actually really good compared to previous sets. You know, we had like Deadly Visit, and I think that was 5 mana for a kill spell with upside, but you couldn't hit Planeswalkers. So I think this is a pretty strong card, at least in Limited, and possibly in Constructed as well. Angrath, Captain of Chaos. I really didn't expect much from this until I played in the stream event, and I think that Amass is a lot better than people thought, but not amazing. It's better because a lot of people just didn't think Amass was going to be good at all, and I think that just having kind of incidental Amass is really strong, especially considering you can play this in a mono black deck, you can play this in a mono red deck, and just giving your creatures menace in a deck like this is totally fine, because what you're essentially doing is you're paying 4 mana for all of your board getting a menace and an additional Amass. So if you already have a army token, you can make that thing bigger and make it much harder to block. If you don't already have an army token, you are getting a creature, which is not worth nothing. And that turn, you're making it more difficult for your opponents to block the creatures that you already do have from 1 to 3. And I think this is potentially going to be a strong contender in some of the more creature-oriented aggressive strategies. Angrath's Rampage, on the other hand, excuse me, is real good in Grixis. Hell yeah! This card is amazing. Being able to force someone to sack a creature or planeswalker is fantastic. The artifact is like, eh. I honestly could see this playing a decent role in possibly like Modern as well, because of the fact that it's just like not a dead card unless you're going against like a really obscure combo deck. But essentially, you're going to be able to force your opponent to sacrifice a creature. That isn't necessarily always going to be good if your opponent's going super wide, but that's not really a giant thing in Modern. And it's not a dead card if you're going up against something like Blue-White Control, where, you know, they're playing Teferis and things like that. This gives you something. It's a sorcery, so you're not going to be able to, like, respond to them plussing or whatever while their mana's tapped. But it is still a non-dead card. So I think that this is possibly going to see play in Modern, if not just in the sideboards. And in Standard, this card is fantastic, right? Being able to just 2 mana do remove one of your opponent's planeswalkers is fantastic. Even though they get the choice, depending on exactly the construction of your deck, that choice might not matter, because you just attack the other one, right? So it's very helpful. Obviously against token strategies, the second creature is not as good, but it's still decent. Cruel Celebrant, oh my goodness gosh. As you probably can tell by the video that was posted yesterday, I really like this card. Not only does it give, like, what are the words I'm looking for? Give, like, EDH decks that are Aristocrat style additional Blood Artists, essentially. It also gives that to Standard. And we still don't have a free sack outlet in Standard, but if Wizards does give us Arena Modern, or Coliseum, as I like to call it, and I still want everyone else to call it so that we can get that to be the real thing. If they give us at least Kaladesh, I'm hoping they give us all the way back to Shadow or Innistrad, but if they give us that, then we have Yahenni, and Yahenni is a free sack outlet. So you will be potentially in situations where you have a nice Cruel Celebrant, you have a nice Yahenni, and a bunch of garbage that you don't care about dying. Your opponent is just like, I can't deal with this board, what do? Do I remove things? Oh, sacrifice a creature, make Yahenni indestructible. Oh, you're going to remove my Cruel Celebrant? Alright, I'll sacrifice all the trash that I don't need, sacrifice my Cruel Celebrant, you've taken a bunch of damage, my Yahenni's indestructible and huge. It's fantastic. But in this Standard, it's still great, because we have things like Bantu, we have things like Priest of Forgotten Gods, we have so many interesting tools. I think maybe we'll finally be able to see an Aristocrats deck that does real work, that maybe breaks into Tier 1, probably just going to be like Tier 1.5, Tier 2, but I love this card. Despark. Despark, possibly good in Modern, not really good in Legacy, which is really interesting, and I kind of put this on here so I could talk about that, because even though this is a 2-mana card, it targets things that have CMC 4 greater. Now, Of course, there are some things that this hits, like Jace the Mind Sculptor. I don't even think Bloodbraid Elf's played more. It does hit Gurmag Angler, things like that. But a lot of the times in Legacy, you're not dealing with a lot of high CMC cards. Modern, there are decent more of them. This hits Phoenix, which is very important. It doesn't hit really low cards like Death Shadow, but it does actually hit things in decks. There are more Planeswalkers, I believe, that are CMC 4 or more in Modern, but you probably don't care about Modern. For Standard, it really depends on how the meta shakes out. For what it's worth, this exiles the majority of Planeswalkers. This exiles Phoenix, it exiles the other Phoenix for Kindling. I forgot they were both Phoenixes. It exiles both Phoenixes. And it can really exile any other pesky things. Now, important to note, this exiles a land. Wizards, initially when they had double-face cards, the second face of the card, so for werewolves, right, the second face of the card was 0 CMC. Because it didn't have a CMC in the top right, it was 0 CMC. And then the day half was the normal CMC. They changed it, I believe, because of an interaction that just was kind of weird, that you can pay 4 mana for a card, but then it's no longer 4 mana, and like people can just play a Ratchet Bomb and immediately blow it up, and like all of a sudden these things are functionally treated as tokens when they're really not. So they decided to change that, and now the back end of a double face card is always the same CMC as the card. I think it's actually the mana cost in general. CMC and mana cost are technically different, but as the card that's on the face side. Primal Wellspring is a 4 CMC card that turns into a land. Primal Amulet. You can blow up, or you can exile Primal Amulet with this card because it doesn't say non-land permanent. I just thought that was really interesting that some people might actually be interested in. Dovin's Veto, or as everyone is going to call it, Dovin's Ban. This card's great. This is a fantastic card for the control counter wars. Unfortunately, it makes Esper control better, and as a Grixis control player, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. But it's a better card against other against other control strategies. So you can be able to take advantage of this if you're just a primarily creature-based deck, just beating the crap out of an Esper control. So I think it's going to play a good role. I don't think it's going to be too oppressive. I think this is probably going to see play in Modern. If Negate's already played, I know like Spellsnar's not really played too much anymore. I think Spellpierce still is. Modern's a crazy place right now, so I haven't really been keeping up with it because I don't like it. But the next one is kind of a twofer. It's Evolution Sage and Flux Channeler. These cards I think are going to be like the backbone of the Proliferate decks, and I think that this is going to be a little bit more combo-centric, and I think this is going to be a little more like value over time-centric. So being able to just, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you don't have to play the land, it just can enter however you proliferate. So I could see potentially some really weird, janky scenarios where you have something like an Evolution Sage, and then something that you want to proliferate, and then you should play like Scapeshift. Just stack your lands, get a bunch of lands, proliferate, what, 10? 15 times? And then you ultimate Planeswalker or something. I don't know, but it's something that's interesting. And for what it's worth, it is like it's 3/2. It does die to things like Shock, but it also can kind of trade up in that it does have that nice 3 toughness. But even just being able to play a land, get some extra value off it is always nice. Actually, I'll say this: some people are wondering why they don't just print landfall on this, because it's functionally landfall. Landfall just is a keyword, I believe, that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, do something. So people are wondering why this isn't, say, landfall proliferate. And the reason for that is because Wizards doesn't want to apply additional complexity to newer players, because that's an additional keyword that they have to learn for this, for essentially like no reason, right? Because it doesn't really save any space, right? We still have flavor text down here. We still have the entirety of the thing. It doesn't look too cluttered. It just doesn't save space for the complexity that would give, if that makes any sense. Flux Channeler, as I said, I think this is going to be a little bit more of a value-oriented one, where you are trying to play maybe a decent number of Planeswalkers, since those are non-creature spells. Maybe you want to be playing artifacts as well. Those, again, they are non-creature spells, instant sorceries, things like that. So I think this is a little bit more of a slow version, but it's still really cool, really interesting. I love the art, for what it's worth. But I do think that this one is less likely to be played than the other one, just because I think the stat line's a little bit better, and even though like technically you're limited to one of these a turn, I think it's a little bit easier to abuse this than it is to abuse this. Not entirely sure. those are my thoughts. Huatli's Raptor, I wanted to talk about because no one else is. It doesn't seem like many people are really high in this card, and I think it's just because the green-white isn't necessarily as looked on. It's not as necessarily as focused upon as the like the blue-green decks. But it's still a 2-mana 2/3 vigilance creature that does proliferate on enters. Now, of course, these things can happen multiple times. This is just on enter, but still. I think this is a reasonable rate for the card that you're getting. It has vigilance, which is nice, and it has a decent set line. I think where this might see play is in some sort of green-white kind of token deck that also has +1/+1 counters. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be anything. I may try it for what it's worth, but I think it is worth a try in something like that. Whether or not it's going to be good, I don't know. Kasmina. We got into the uncommons at some point. I don't remember exactly. Who cares? Kasmina. She did a lot more work than I expected. Obviously, Merchant, High English Dad. Merchant is going to be playing this in a Wizards deck, which, sure, there are still a lot of Wizards in Standard right now, so I think that's a really interesting thing. But just being able to make a creature and have a looting effect is really strong, right? This, I think that is a little underestimated, and the fact that it just makes your creatures and planeswalkers harder to deal with single target removal. I think that together makes this worth trying out in some sort of tempo-y style, maybe even like blue-red wizard style deck. Kaya, Bane of the Dead. I don't know if this is going to see play. I think it has strong abilities, and it has a nice starting loyalty, but at 6 mana, I'm just not sure if this is good enough. The main reason I think that it's potentially super strong is because it just ignores hexproof, which is important essentially for Carnage Tyrant. And now Carnage Tyrant kind of is the annoyance to non-Wrath decks that you don't want to Wrath. So like Esper Control is not going to care about a Carnage Tyrant. They'll just blow up the board with something like High's Wrath or even Celebrate or something like that. But something like just a white-black mid-range deck that just runs a ton of creatures isn't going to want to do that. Because they might just run out. They lose on their board just as much as they do. So possibly this is going to see play kind of as a hit to Carnage Tyrant, maybe even just in the sideboard as a one of. But it is just good. You know, you get 2 exiles for the rest of the game as long as she's on the field. Their stuff can't have hexproof, so you know it's decent. I just don't know if it's going to be there. It's not good in like any other Eternal format except EDH. In EDH, I feel like I've never had an issue with hexproof in EDH, except when, I guess there's some decks that give themselves hexproof, like the player, and you might want this if you know someone who does that. Tura. This card is real good. This card's like real good. It's friggin' 3 mana for a 7 loyalty planeswalker. Pretty good. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control with 4 or greater, draw a card. That's good. Also, untap target permanent. It's permanent. That's not... You can untap whatever you want. You can untap a Gilded Lotus to play more spells, to play more big creatures. You can untap a mana creature or a land and make more things. And interestingly, if you have, I think there's a tap proliferate effect in the set. But if you have something that allows you to proliferate, this just is free constantly, and that's really awesome. I think this card is really interesting in that blue-green proliferate deck. But honestly, you might see it in something else. This is kind of like a mono-green deck, right? Like the issue is, where do you put it on the like what do you take out? What justifies putting this in? Because it is just a card that draws you a bunch of cards. But I'm not sure where you'd take things out. But I do think that is potentially good in some sort of less bursty style of mono-green. No one was talking about Leyline Prowler. This is Beast Nighthawk. This is Leyline Nighthawk. Vampire Prowler, whatever. This is very similar to Vampire Nighthawk. The difference, of course, being that this can't fly, but it does have the ability to add a mana. I feel like the stats are just so good for this. Like, how does this not see some sort of play? It has Death Touch, Lifelink. It trades up fantastically against aggro. It's just a stone wall. Against control, you can just use it to ramp out your larger threats, or just keep attacking them with it. This card is great like in a vacuum, but whether or not we're actually going to be able to see any play is based on what the meta is. And I'm not sure I want to live in a world where this awesome statted creature is not played. Narset, Part of the Veils. initially didn't care too much about this. But I think this is possibly a really strong card in control mirrors, right? So this is something where you bring in from the sideboard, because you don't want your opponent to be drawing extra cards, right? A lot of the time, the resource game is what really makes or breaks your control matchups. But having something that essentially says that your opponent can no longer get additional cards, they can't get their bonus from Teferi, they can't Chemistry's Insight, things like that, is really strong. And the fact that it does allow you, at least 2 times, you might have Proliferate or something, to look at the top 4 and just get, essentially you get the Search for Azcanta effect. I think that is just incredibly strong. Ral's Outburst. I feel like this card's a really strong card in some sort of control. I don't think I'm going to justify playing it in Grixis, but I think this card might allow just purely Izzet, maybe even Counterburn, but some sort of Izzet or Jeskai control-y style deck to work. I've seen this card played on Versus Live by SCG, Star City Games, and this card was decent when I saw it. Yeah, well, this is another one that I think it just has to. We just have to see what the meta does. Delicious. Saheeli, I actually think is good. Has nothing to do with her mind stability. You are very rarely, unless you're playing like a some sort of artifact deck. Cool, you can do that. Have your fun. The fact that you just get bonus value from casting a non-creature spell is real nice, right? Like you can just be playing kind of cantripy type things, just kind of decent value cards like removal, for example, and you just get. Over time, you accrue this value, and you can just use that to kill your opponent. It's unfortunate that these aren't Thopters. They can't fly, but Servos, well, it's fine. I just think it's a really interesting card, and for what it's worth, I really want them to bring Kaladesh back so I can play some more module combo. I don't know if she'll make the cut, but I'll definitely try things. 10th District Legionnaire. This looks like a normal, limited uncommon. This card is strong. When paired with Feather the Redeemer, this card is actually insane. The fact that already it's just a 2-mana 2/2 with haste, that's good, right? We've seen how decent the Rakdos one is. I can see the art. Can't remember what it was by Stephen Argyle. We've seen how good that is. It does have an additional ability, and so does this. Whenever you cast a spell that targets 10th District Legionnaire, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then scry 1. I used this to an interesting effect in one of my streams where I had one of the cards that deals 2 damage to a creature you control and 4 damage to a creature you don't control. You can immediately, because this happens on target, before the spell resolves, you get that +1/+1 counter and scry. So you target this, you get the sweet counter, so it's up to 3. You kill a creature, and you get to scry. Very strong. With Feather, you also are getting those cards back, getting the scries, getting the +1/+1 counters, and this thing still has haste. This card is strong. I expect to see a lot of Boros 10th District Legionnaire in some sort of Boros deck, whether it's just with Feather or whether it's just with some sort of Boros Pump. Well, if you're playing Boros Pump Spells, you're probably playing Feather. Meh, whatever. I expect to see this card. Shut up, people outside. My beard's a mess. I am sorry for that. I had a long day. Tyrant Scorn. Cards like this have been good in the past. It allows you, at instant speed, which is not nothing, to destroy a small creature that maybe is pestering you. And there are a lot of small creatures, at least in the current standard, that you're going to want to deal with, mono blue, mono red, mono white. Right? There's plenty of things that you want to do in there. But in those decks, in some of those decks, I should say, there are a couple creatures that are a little bit bigger. For what it's worth, you don't really want to put a Venom Loxodon back in your opponent's hand. But when you aren't playing those decks, this isn't a dead card because it does allow you to get some form of life buffer because you're chunking one of their large dudes back in their hand. So I don't know if this is necessarily going to see play. I'll try it in the sideboard of Grixis Control. I don't think this card's main deckable, but I think it's a decent sideboard option, and I'll give it a try. I'm a little skeptical, but it's what else. Now we move to the rares. Yes, now we move to the rares. Johnny the Greathearted. This card's good. It's a part of a combo where you get a bunch of Jaces and stuff. But it also is just a good card in the kind of go wide +1/+1 counter deck that I was talking about, right? Like, if you want to have, like, Evolution Stage, you want to have, nope, this one, Watley's Raptor, Watley's Raptor. This is kind of the deck that you would have, because you're putting a 1/1 counter on each creature you control, which means if you proliferate, you get that much extra value. So you really want to go wide with Ajani, and you'd go wide with Ajani via token production. And since you already have a little bit of +1/+1 counters, whenever you proliferate with that amount of +1/+1 counters, you're getting so much more value than if you're playing just to proliferate on a couple of things. So I think this is very strong, especially because it does give your creature vigilance. Means you can just kind of attack in with impunity, not really worrying about the crackback. And then, you know, +3 life is actually kind of decent as well, because this might also just be a card that you put into some sort of a Johnny's Primate deck. I mean, it's in the name, right? It's his Primate. It makes sense that he works with it. Bioessence Hydra. I think this is a meme. I don't think this is actually going to be good, like, normally. But it's an interesting payoff for Planeswalker decks. Whether or not this is actually strong, I mean, it does decent work with Kiora. You know, Kiora already is a 7 loyalty Planeswalker. Let's say you use Kiora a couple of times in order to get to the point where you can play Bioessence Hydra. She has like 5 loyalty left. This comes in as a 9/9 with Trample, draws you a card, and if for some reason you're able to put another counter on a Planeswalker, you get that many counters. What's notable is that when you play a new Planeswalker, it enters and those counters are placed on it, right? So as long as this works it's worded how Doubling Season's worded, so I believe, I could be wrong, but, you know, check me on this. But I believe when you play a new Planeswalker, this gets all of the loyalty, it gets an equivalent amount of +1/+1 counters based on the creature's loyalty, or the permanent's Planeswalker's loyalty. I can speak words. Shut up, bad class. I don't think this is actually super strong, but I played this in limited. Holy shit, it was fun. I got 4 out of the 5. My opponent didn't have an artifact. I was able to surgically destroy my opponent's board. Enchantment, gone. Creature, gone. Planeswalker, gone. Blow up a land for good measure, gone. So good. If there is an Abzan control, or even just like a rock control deck, I mean, Sultai could even use this potentially. This is a strong card. This is a contender. Just because it costs like board white mana and doesn't have actual like board white stuff on it, does not mean this card is bad. If anything, this is a fantastic card for EDH, that's for sure. But I hope I don't think it's going to be played in standard, but I hope it does, because my god, when this goes off, it's so good. Command the Dreadhorde. I actually put this in here as a warning. Don't play this card. It kills you. It deals a lot of damage to you. Because it's equal to the total converted mana cost, it's really hard justifying getting anything back. So this is more of like a warning. You can play it if you want, but these Planeswalkers aren't cheap. You know, let's say you get a 4 mana Planeswalker and, like, let's say a 4 mana creature. That's 8 damage, right? If you're at 20, you have 12 life remaining. That's 4 burn spells from a mono red deck. You've probably taken the damage anyway. I think this card is a bit of a trap. You maybe can play it if you're in a heavy life gain deck. If you're like a super heavy life gain deck, you can maybe play this as a 1-of just to bring the boys back. But other than that, it's not a good idea. Maybe in a control matchup where you're going super long and you play a bunch of Planeswalkers, maybe is risky. This is my warning. Play it at your own risk. Commence the end game. This card's real good. It can't be countered. Fantastic in the control decks. I believe every blue control deck is going to play this card, at least as a 2-of, because of just how strong it is. You are able to get cards undisrupted by your opponent, and you're going to get a creature undisrupted by the opponent. Since you draw 2 cards, the minimum creature you're going to get is a 2/2. But because you're playing control, you are probably going to get, on average, a 4 or 5 drop, and that is just good. You're paying 5 mana for an uncounterable instant speed, draw 2, make a 5/5. That is very strong. If you're able to get this to something like 6/6, that is pretty much the same as playing a Torrential Gearhulk and just recasting something like not Canvas Insight, the one that came before with the energy, whatever. And that was a strong card. People complained about that card, so I do think this is going to be one of the mainstays in the upcoming standard, as long as aggro doesn't murder everyone. enter the God Eternals. If I said the last card was going to be played in every blue control deck, this is going to be played in every blue-black control deck. Esper Control, I think, has no reason not to play this. Grixis Control is absolutely playing this. And what other blue? Sultai Control, I don't know if that's going to be a thing, but it's good. Because even though it's a sorcery, it is 5 mana. That's not too bad. Because what you're doing is you're blowing up a thing. You're gaining 4 life or more, depending on if you have like damage increase stuff, whatever. And then you can target a player and put 4 cards into the graveyard. I don't know. Against certain decks, you definitely want to target yourself. Against some decks, it's probably fine targeting them. But you don't necessarily need to target yourself unless you can take advantage of it with like jumpstart cards and stuff. And then you amass 4. Cool. What everyone, including me, is really annoyed by is that this card costs 5 mana. Why doesn't it cost 4 mana? Like, I understand that it's probably it's absolutely way too strong at 4 mana with this cost, but make it blue, blue, black, black, right? Like, oh right, this is part of a cycle. Never mind. But still, you know, this it does make me sad. But still, I think this is going to be a fantastic card. I can't wait to play this card so much. It's so good. Dreadhorde Busher. This is why I've been talking about aggro the entire time. This is a good card. It has hasty haste. It has the Slith effect, where when you deal damage to opponent. Oh wait, you can also hit Planeswalkers with this card and get the bonus. You get a +1/+1 counter. Cool. That by itself, pretty decent. You know, decent stats for a Slith. But when it dies, you deal damage equal to its power to any target. It does not say equal to the number of +1/+1 counters. It says power. You have a Judith out. This dies. You get that extra one. You equip this with something, it dies. You get all of that extra juice. This card's good. People, you're going to combo die to this card. I can't even go through all of the ways that you're going to die to this. There's obviously the Collision Colossus combo deck where you just target this with Colossus, attack with it, get Colossus again for free. You have, what, 9 power? This is a 2 mana card. If you have that card in hand, on turn 3, you can attack for 9 trample damage. Real good. Also, you can just get burn spells with this. You can play this in burn. It's not the best, but you can play this in burn. And just keep burning your opponent. It's good. It's great. Just all those 1 mana burn spells. It's top notch. You would probably not love to play this in burn unless you have a lot of good 1-drops. Because you can't get those spectacle things. It doesn't actually change the cost. So. Yeah, converted mana cost. Okay, yeah. Feather. I like Feather. When I talked about... Damn it. There we go. 10th District Legionnaire. I mentioned how good it is in conjunction with Feather. Shut up. It's fine. And this card is probably just going to end up being a meme. But, you know, you can make more Angels decks just because you have an additional 3-drop Angel. Before we only had Resplendent. So, you know, you could have Resplendent plus, like, 2 of these. And, you know, 3 mana, 3/4 stats with flying is not terrible by itself. But being able to... Oh my God, being able to split up things is so good. You have a spell that makes your creature indestructible. I think you scry with that one. There's the removal spell that I talked about, where it deals 2 damage to one of your creatures and 4 damage to one of your opponent's creatures. There are several cards where you can like split damage. Those are good. Theoretically, you could. I don't know why you would do this, but you could expansion explosion. You can just keep explosioning for X = 3 and getting that back constantly. It's not a good idea, but you can do it. Narset's Reversal. This is going to be a part of a combo deck that includes Expansion Explosion with the new Ral. You just copy spells constantly. Speaking of the new Ral, you can just copy spells constantly. So for those of you who don't know, you get a Ral out, right? Cool. A spell happens. Maybe your opponent casts it, maybe you cast it. Doesn't matter. You have instant speed cards. Expansion. I hope you all know this, but it copies a spell that's on the stack. You can choose new targets, whatever. Narset's Reversal allows you to copy an instant sorcery spell, then return it to your opponent's hand. But that's not really what matters, because what you do is someone casts a thing, right? You cast an expansion targeting that thing. Then you cast a Narset's Reversal, copying the original expansion. which bounce. Okay, I can't remember exactly how to do it with Narcissus Reversal. You can do it with Narcissus Reversal, whatever. The main thing is you copy a spell with expansion, and then the copy a spell with expansion, and then you like expansion your expansion, and then the first expansion is the expansion. It's I'm not good at combos. All right, you go infinite, you kill your opponent with pings. Just whatever. Sorin, I had a really good time with Sorin in the white-black deck. I think this is a decent card for Aristocrats because the majority of your creatures are going to be relatively low CMC, and you're going to be able to get those back from your graveyard pretty easily. Also, he is a 4-mana 4 Planeswalker, so that's nice. Having all your creatures have lifelink is pretty decent. And, you know, it's a +2, so it's not difficult to you know, +2 this and then get a 6-drop back. So I think this is, you know, it's pretty decent. It's pretty decent. Soul Diviner. I want to say this card is good. Somewhere. I want to say this card is good. It's a 2-mana 2/3 body, just like Huatli's Raptor. But it draws a card to remove a counter from a thing. Now, people obviously have talked about the Dreadhorde Invasion with this card. Dreadhorde Invasion is beginning of your upkeep, amass 1 and lose a life. This essentially is at, you know, every turn you lose a life and you draw a card. That's Phyrexian Arena. That's a good card, right? That is a strong card. And if you have that setup, it's really good. But where do you play it? Do you play it in a normal zombies deck? Do you play it in some sort of mid-rangey or control deck? Is a 2-mana 2/3 good in that case? Like, it's where does this fit? I think this is a strong card. It's just where exactly does it go? And I'm not sure. Spark Double, this card. I did not realize. So when I first saw this card, I was like, oh yeah, it's another clone thing. It's very similar to a card that I can't remember that's played in like every EDH deck ever. I can see it in my head, but I don't know the name. Regardless, I was like, oh, cool, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. It just copies a thing. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Then I reread it, and I saw that if it's a Planeswalker, it's not legendary anymore. So you can get several of the same Planeswalker with this card. This scares me. I lost horribly to this during the stream, I think, and yeah, I don't wanna die, but I think I'm gonna die to this card. That said, I don't think it's actually strong. I think the first few days or weeks are going to be very memey. You're going to see a lot of like weird decks. And I think this is going to be very strong in those first weeks. But after a while, this card is not good enough. Teferi, though, this card. It's annoying. It can bounce a card, like 5-mana Teferi, and they get to draw a card, like 5-mana Teferi. And they can just, you know, they can plus things and cast sorceries on your turn. If they get this and the other Teferi, just concede. The sadness is real. Elder Spell. I think this is a decent sideboard card if Planeswalker decks are actually like good. Otherwise, it actually isn't that great because it can't kill creatures. It is also a sorcery, so you can't do like shenanigans with it. I think this is potentially good depending on how strong Planeswalkers actually are. Time Wipe. This card seems good, but not in a normal control deck. Like, you have Cleansing Nova in a normal control deck. And, I mean, for what it's worth, you can play Cleansing Nova in things that don't have blue. This, you might as well play it. Just so you can have some sort of incidental value with some creatures you play. But it is just a board wipe that is decent. You are probably going to see it somewhere. Whether or not it's going to replace Cleansing Nova entirely, I'm not sure, because Cleansing Nova does have that additional text of Artifact or Enchantment. Ugin. This card's strong. I initially was looking too much at the static ability. You don't have to care about that at all. You're plussing, like 6 mana for 4 loyalty walker is not great, but you're paying 6 mana to plus and get a 2/2 that when it dies you essentially draw a card, and that's pretty strong. I should say it's not when it dies, it's when it leaves the battlefield. So even if your opponent like exiles it or bounces it or something, you still get the card. And then you can just destroy a permanent. That's at least one color. Not a lot of artifacts running around that you really have to care about. I will say though, look at this Ugin though. He's saying, "Bro, come at me." Watchful Brutality, I believe, is the last card I'm talking about. Amass, as I said, was a little bit stronger than I expected. So I think if you're playing an Amass deck, you're probably playing this card as well. I think Amass decks aren't going to be like these aggressive decks, but they're also not going to be control decks. I think they're going to be some sort of mid-range deck where you're playing just decent Amass spells and stuff like this to deal with your opponent's stuff. I think that I think that this is going to potentially be a staple of the amassed decks. Now, let's head over to the thing I was talking about. This is a myth or mistake, as I'm calling it, because I don't want to call it hit or miss, because that would maybe be covering. So the finale cycle, these are based... Oh, they're staggered. I did not realize that. The finale cycle are based on the cycles from Hour of Devastation, the defeat cycles. No, the Hour of cycle. So there's like Hour of Devastation, Hour of Eternity, Hour of Glory, etc., etc. I think that these are really interesting because they are X spells, or X color spells, and I believe the majority of them are really good mythics. You know, Finale of Devastation is just a search your library card. You know, we've seen that before with things like Grixis on Zenith and Court of Calling. Geez. But this has a really interesting effect where if X is 10 or more, you get big creatures. For what it's worth, it doesn't get trample, so it actually is relatively easy to block as long as you don't allow your opponent to amass such a large board. But I do think this is mythic worthy. Finale of Eternity I thought was not mythic worthy, and that's because you can only destroy up to 3 target creatures. It would have been nicer if you could maybe like destroy X number of creatures, but X, like the X, or the creatures can only be of a certain CMC or something like that, or CMC or below. But I've come to realize that this card is actually kind of fine if you're able to make a large amount of mana, cough, mono black using Cabal Stronghold. You're going to be able to just res all the creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield. For what it's worth, mono black with Cabal Stronghold in the past hasn't really played a lot of creatures. We'll see if we can work something like this. This is decent mythic, kind of on the edge. Especially because the flavor doesn't really add up too much. 3 target creatures, Liliana talking to Bolas, it's like, eh. Finale of Glory, this card's good. Make no mistake, this card's really good. It's just a sorcery, but you're getting 2/2s with Vigilance. So, you know, paying 5 mana for this, you're getting 6 power that are Vigilant creatures. That is a good deal. That's a good rate by itself. If you are able to, say in a deck that has a bunch of tokens and plays things like Song of Freyalise, if you're able to get up to 10, you also get, it's not instead of, you also get X4/4 angel creatures with Vigilance and Flying. This card is good. It's also, you know, it's flavorful, art card, whatever. Finale of Promise. It's okay. It doesn't feel as mythic unless you hit 10. Like, this card feels decent already when it's not 10. This feels decent already when it's not 10. It's better when it's 10, obviously. This feels like good. This is a search your library card. This one doesn't feel as good. The thing about that, though, is that burn exists, and I think this is going to be really good with burn. If you can, I will say, like, X is not going to be 10 in burn, but if you're able to just get, you know, a burn spell with this, with the instant, a burn spell with the sorcery, you can kill your opponent really easily. You know, this is additional 6 damage, and it's using resources from your graveyard, so it's not like you need that, like, you're essentially getting 2 cards for 1. I mean, you're literally getting 2 cards for 1. But in EDH, though, this card's real awesome, and that is why. And the fact that this is Niv and stuff, that's why this card's fine. It's Mythic fine. You just draw cards. And then, if X is 10 or more, you shuffle your graveyard and library in there, then draw X cards. Oh, then you untap 5 land, and you have no maximum hand for the rest of the game. Hell yeah! I don't know why this one gets exiled and the others don't. I assume it's for, like, repeating with them, because you could just keep cycling your Finale of Revelations. But, I mean, at that point, let them have it. This card's absolutely mythic. The Finale of Revelation being that this egg is, Bolas's egg is tied to Ugin is really interesting. Gideon, Planeswalkers are probably just going to get a free pass to be mythic. This specific one is really awesome because he's just naturally a creature instead of having to activate his loyalty ability. It's a mythic. This one is not a real mythic. So all of the God Eternals I think are fantastically mythics. All of the gods, I should say. Bantu is great rate by itself. I love all of the gods having this really cool ability. And then of course Bantu herself being able to sack things is nice. Kefnet, really strong CMC, God ability is fantastic. I'm not gonna say that again. But being able to just get additional value off the top is what blue wants, so it's very good. Oketra feels really strange because she's white and she makes 4/4 black zombies, which is a very strange thing for white to do. But white is the color of tokens. It's one of the 2 colors of tokens, big colors of tokens. And you know, you want to be playing a bunch of little creatures. How do you play a bunch of creatures in one turn? You make them little, put it with Oketra, pretty good. Kefnet, or not Kefnet, Ronus seems to be the one that not a ton of people are talking about by itself, but is a real strong card. This is a fantastic card in EDH, as well as I think you're probably going to be seeing some amount of this in the mono green decks, because it is just like you put this in play and you have something like a what is that dang? Steel Leaf Champion. Jesus. I could see the art. You have a Steel Leaf Champion out, which already has a pseudo evasion, and you play this, and all of a sudden it has 10 power, and your opponent can't chump block it. They have to block with something big. If they don't have something big, they just take 10. If you're, for some reason, you haven't won yet with a Ghalta out, you play this with Ghalta in play, you now have a 24 power 24 power attack creature, and this works for all of your creatures. Real nice. Ilharg. This is like the most mythic of the gods. This is a boar god that has been mentioned previously in the lore of the Gruul clans. It's a big porky boy, not a beefy boy, it's a porky boy, and it just attacks, shoves something in from your hand into play. Imagine shoving God Eternal Ronus into play. Then you have a 10 power from Ronus and 12 power from Ilharg. It's pretty damn good. Also, you get to bounce it back to your hand, so if it has cool ETBs, you get extra. Mythic. Liliana. She's great. I think she's like my favorite card in the set. Being able to just draw cards when stuff dies, real nice. Make a token, real nice. Removal, oh, it's so good. Oh, look at this. Just mass destroy things, great. Bolas, I'm actually surprised at how not as amazing he is. When I say a mass is a lot better than I expected, Bolas is slightly worse, not a lot worse, but slightly worse than I expected. Just because your opponents can choose to exile lands, so a lot of times they're just going to exile lands. Means that the +1 is not nearly as good. You do get to draw cards still, but you know, for 5 mana and a 4 loyalty walker, especially one with that stringent of cost, it seems a little unfortunate. The -3 is great, and then the -8 is fucking hilarious, but we have Dominarian standard with a bunch of legendary creatures, and we now have a set with a bunch of planeswalkers. It's weird where you can get to an ultimate state with your planeswalker and you just can't actually use it because your opponent wouldn't be affected by it. Still mythic, still fantastic, but that's whatever. I just realized now that Wizards really did knock it out of the park with these mythics. It doesn't seem like any of these are not great. I will talk about one in a second. Niv Mizzet Reborn. He has become the new guild pack, I believe. It's unfortunate that he like kind of died off screen. Well, whatever, it's fine. But it's a fantastic card. The fact that he deals with each color pair and you get one of each signifies that guild aspect. So I think, honestly, in terms of flavor meshing with mechanics, I think this card is probably the most mythic in this set because of the fact that you get one of each of the guilds. You get one spell, one card from each guild. That's all you can get. You can't get any 3-color, 4-color, 5-color cards. No. You only get the guild colors because Niv Mizzet is the new guild pack. I think that's fantastic. Is he usually a 6/6? I think he's usually a 6/6. It might have been too strong as a 7/7, but I always like 7/7s as commanders. I'm thinking about this now in terms of a commander. I don't think this is going to see play in standard. I'm going to try and make a meme deck with this, but I just don't think it's good enough, unfortunately. Words. I like them being 7/7s because you hit with them 7 times, and that means your opponent dies because of the commander rule. So next, I'm actually going to skip. No, I'll do this. Rolesque. I really wish they made this a little bit easier to pronounce, but whatever. Apex Hydra, 5 mana, 4/5, flying, trample. When it enters the battlefield, put 2+1/+1 counters on another target creature you control. When he dies, proliferate, then proliferate again. This is kind of bordering on mistake to me. And there are a few reasons for this. Obviously, it's possible that I've missed this somewhere, but who is this? Right? This is a legendary creature I've never heard of. The issue isn't that it's a legendary creature I've never heard of, it's the issue that it's also a mythic, right? Like, it would have been cooler seeing, like, I don't know, not Vanifar, the previous guild leader. I can't remember her name. The merfolk woman. It'd be more interesting seeing her evolve and transcend into something better because she's no longer the guildmaster. I feel like that would be more interesting. So on flavor, kind of a mistake. Just because, and obviously I could be wrong. This could be a character that we do know. I just don't. So it's kind of just like strange that they gave this to this card, especially considering Ravnica has so many legends that people want to see printed. As in terms of its ability, I think it's strong. You know, it's a 4-mana 4/5 Flampler that does give you immediate value when it enters. But if it enters alone, you don't get that immediate value. For what it's worth, I think it's still worth it. You know, 5-mana 4/5 Flample is decent. It's a little unfortunate that you can't target itself, but it would be a 6/5 if you could do that, or 6/7. Sorry. So you know, it is probably too strong if you do that. And then one last thing is, I don't love that it's on dies. We've seen that a decent amount of things in this set are on leaves. Decent amount. A few things in the set are on leaves. And having such a mythic card already that has a pretty restrictive mana cost, it's unfortunate that if it gets exiled or bounced, you don't get that. I guess if it gets bounced, you don't want people to be taking advantage of that. But maybe if it said when it dies or is exiled, right? Something like that. Oh wait, but then you have flicker effects. All right, no, I take that back. I think this is reasonable for balance reasons because you can flicker it and when it puts into exile or whatever. So fine, it's fine. I think that in terms of the actual like mechanics and things like that, totally mythic. That's fine. I think it does a lot of interesting things. And you know, I think we've only seen proliferate then proliferate on one other card, which is Contagion Engine. So you know that still feels like a mythic text. So that's fine. But just in terms of flavor, kind of a mistake to me to not give it to someone who's a little bit more well-known. Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge. It's a 6-mana Planeswalker, 5 loyalty, and it's a buy a box. And that is primarily what I'm going to talk about, because for what it's worth, Planeswalkers, for the most part, they just get to be mythic, because who cares? Creature and Planeswalker spells you cast have affinity for artifacts. Cool, we're bringing back affinity. That's a really nice flavor thing. Makes it even more mythic. +2. Master of the Bridge deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of artifacts you control. You gain X life. That is a plus ability that I believe was a minus ability on a different version of Tezzeret. That's strong. It doesn't deal damage to creatures, which means like you can't really remove it. But being able to just gain life and deal damage to your opponent is real strong. -3, return target artifact card from a graveyard to your hand. It's unfortunate, like this is kind of, you know, middling. You're not able to buy back something to the battlefield. You're not able to get anything else, which for what it's worth, you shouldn't. It should just be artifact. So it was fine. -8, exile the top 10 cards of the library, put all artifact cards from among them onto the battlefield. Well, it makes it really good for artifact combo decks. The issue, just like Nexus Fate, less so than Nexus Fate, but similar to Nexus Fate, this is a good card. You know, Impervious Great Worm, that's never seen play in, like, even EDH. Like, why would you ever play this unless you're, like, thudding your opponents, right? That's not seen play anywhere. The Haunt of Hightower, that also, I mean, maybe you play that in EDH, but not really seen play. Nexus Fate was a problem. It was a mistake. I don't think Tezzeret is going to be a mistake to the same extent, but I do believe having this card be a buy box promo is a mistake because it is strong. Not only is it strong generally, like you want to play this in artifact EDH decks. I think this is incredibly strong. The fact that you're giving all of your creatures and planeswalkers in that artifact deck affinity is nuts. You know, there are plenty of artifact creatures that you want to play. You know, friggin' Myr Battlesphere. You have Steel Dragon, Steel Hellkite. I think it's Steel Hellkite, Wormcoil Engine. These things, being able to just play those things for free, and then plus to just burn each of your opponents. They say each opponent, so this works great in multiplayer. The fact of that means that this card is probably going to be incredibly sought after for EDH purposes alone, and there are plenty of cards that are just EDH cards that are relatively high in price. But beyond that, this might actually see play in Standard because of the fact that there are plenty of other creatures in Esper colors, or plenty of other planeswalkers and good artifacts that you can very easily build some sort of artifact-based deck around this, Karn, Old Dovin, things like that. And I think that this is a mistake. It's a mythic in terms of the flavor, what the card does, etc., etc. But I don't, because I like buy boxes in concept, right? Impervious Great Worm and Haunt, they're not really attractive, right? They don't fulfill the purpose of buy boxes, which is to get people into their local game stores and buy boxes, right? Those cards, not great. Nexus and Tezzeret are good in terms of getting people into stores and buying the box, but it just makes such an annoying card, not only for people to collect. Maybe they have a Planeswalker collection, maybe they just have a Tezzeret collection, they like Tezzeret. It's slightly harder to get this card. Now you might be saying, oh, stop whining, price, card, whatever. It's just frustrating that it's like this. I think It would be better if they did like a promo version of a card that's already in the deck. You know, this is the Mythic, this is the Nicol Bolas set where cool stuff happens. Maybe you make a super special Nicol Bolas that has like a really cool frame treatment. Maybe he has like his border is kind of non-existent, so you see more of the art, something like that. And that way people don't have to buy it, because it's just aesthetics, right? You don't need that card, but you do need to pay for a Tezzeret if you're unable to buy an entire box. So I think that's just, it's unfortunate. I really hope Wizards does still think about modifying the way that they do these buy boxes. I do like them. I believe Wizards has said that they do their job. They do get more boxes sold to LGSs, but I think that so far they've done not good enough and too good. We need to either find that middle ground or do something different. And I just don't know what that is. Hell, honestly, if you just like commission a single full art for every set and make like a pack of one each of the basic lands a buy box promo, people like a full art land buy box where you just get 5 each, those would sell like hotcakes, but no one would need them, right? But if you imagine just having some full arts of the Ravnican lands, people would buy that, people would love that, and it wouldn't make this really strange situation where if you want to play a certain deck in Standard, you have such a limited amount of that card. So I don't know, those are my thoughts. This has taken significantly longer than I expected it to. My voice is destroyed because yesterday I talked all day. Whatever, I was gonna go to the end card. Cool. I hope that you've enjoyed my speaking of words. I will be back with some cool war as soon as that comes out. It comes out today for you all, but I have class from 9 until like 3, and then I have some experiments to run until like 5, so I actually won't be able to play it until after everyone. So I will be making that for tomorrow's video, which will be Friday for you all. Ugh, time travel. But yeah, I would like to, of course, thank my lovely patrons, especially Salamander, Croft, and Zin, for the continued support. If you'd like to join them in supporting the channel via Patreon, you can find links to that down in the description. You could also just click the join button if you'd like to join the channel, become essentially a 5-mana patron. And, you know, it's easier. You don't have to have Patreon and stuff like that. It goes straight through YouTube. Let's see. In the description, you'll also find links to the Discord server and my Aetherhub account where I host my deck lists. I do hope that you've enjoyed, to some extent, this kind of oddball video, because no one was going to watch me play a non-war Standard, let's be honest. I will apologize. I did ask for people in yesterday's video what I should do for today's video, and people did give me some really interesting ideas. I'll try and play those relatively soon, modified with war, but I decided I might as well do this. But I do hope you've enjoyed this. If you did, go and tap that like button, add a subscription to Manipool, cast one of those comments to the comment section down below, pass the turn, and the vid to some of your friends, and until next time, all will be one.